we'll see about that. But like you're saying about Caruso went to the Bulls, and the Bulls, I think, were the other, the Bulls are the other big actor in
Oh
this
yeah,
NBA free agency period. The Caruso signing, sure, that happened, but that's nearly not what, that's not what everyone's going to be talking about. It's the fact that they got Lonzo Ball in the sign and trade. I think they gave him a second round pick. There's stuff I can look at the details, but they got Lonzo Ball in the sign and trade with the Pelicans,
Pelicans.
and they got DeMar DeRozan, uh, and they ended up paying a huge amount for DeMar DeRozan. That
Yeah,
was a little wild, in my opinion, just how much that he got paid. So,
right.
uh, give me your thoughts on the Bulls. Trying to get the details out.
I think so. I think honestly, the Bulls in the past year or so, I think they've done well in some ways. Just roster wise, I'll go through that first. Roster wise, I think they've done pretty well. I don't know why it hasn't translated to like more wins. So initially, when at the trade deadline they traded for Nikola Vucevic, I was a big fan of that. I think that Vucevic was a great player in Orlando. I thought he'd help the Bulls a lot, and make help hopefully help them push for a playoffs. So the Bulls actually missed out on the playoffs last season, and kind of a disappointment, honestly, especially when you acquire big as a piece as Vucevic.
Also, like Zach Levine was injured for a little bit
Yeah,
of.
he went to health and safety protocols as well just before the playoffs. So yeah, that did hurt. There are a lot of reasons, but um, I just think that they should have done a little bit better there, for sure. Now this free agency period, I think they really like double down and try to say that okay, we're really trying to make a push here. So getting Lonzo Ball, I think that's going to be very good. I think Lonzo's the guy's I think is at this point maybe a little bit underrated for what he's doing. He's really stepped up and worked hard on like doing better on his shooting. So he used to have that flappy like elbow kind of like shooting form. That's gone away. He's become a much better shooter, much better 3-point shooter. So that's great. And his passing's always been great. And I think he did make a good impact in the Pelicans last season. So this will be great and helpful for the Bulls. I guess it's replacing quote unquote kind of like not really replacing, but seeing what Kobe White will do. Maybe Kobe is going to be like relegated to like a short burst second unit kind of guy rather than like being the point guard the entire time.
Yeah.
Lonzo will take that position over, and
Yeah.
I think that's an upgrade. And then the big one, of course, it's DeMar. Yeah, I think DeMar. It's going to be interesting for him. Actually comes into a situation where he can immediately contribute and help. I think he's still got some left in the tank, especially with his kind of game. I think it ages okay. It's not something that I think will, he will quickly go downhill with. It's just that, he always does that mid-range game, which, it's very much scarce now in the modern NBA, but he does it so well that I think it will help complements kind of like the shooting in some ways. I think Zach Levine is a guy that's getting more and more kind of like he can shoot a lot of threes. So it helps with like, the spacing won't be too much of an issue. That's what I'm trying to get because like DeMar DeRozan is a mid range kind of guy, but Levine is a kind of perimeter guy. So that won't be an issue there. I think salary wise, I will speak to real quickly. The $85 million that they gave DeMar DeRozan, 4 years, 85.
It was 3 years, 85 actually.
Is it 3 years?
Yeah, it's 3 years.
3 years. 3 years. My bad. So that seems a little, that's a little bit interesting. Let's just say that because I think as sources reported, the Bulls I think did not have any other competitors that matched anywhere near that price of 85-3 for three. It was just like a premium they decided to put on themselves to pay, which I guess the Spurs happily, decided that okay, that's not a problem. We'll just let DeMar do that then, and not match that kind of like crazy ass contract. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's a little interesting. I guess the Bulls really wanted to spend their cap or something like that, but that's just like I feel like it's a little inefficient in ways they might regret later down the road doing. So what's your thoughts?
Yeah. So I think the big overall takeaways is I think there's if you a team like the Bulls, right? Uh pre MJ, they were pretty much, a joke. And then, MJ, the Bulls had this cachet with them, but they started, they weren't really successful beyond, let's say, some few Tom Thibodeau years with Derrick Rose. Like they've kind of been irrelevant. The Bulls have been pretty much irrelevant, and they were, getting there when it comes to this decade, or this stretch, post Tom Thibodeau and post Jimmy Butler. Even. So yeah, I think they were kind of, you get Zach Levine. Zach Levine is developing. And this ties into what they were doing last year, right? Zach Levine is developing, and you know, he's 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 put up solid numbers. He's like one of the, like these shooting guards that have just, that can just score from anywhere. He developed into that. And with the we'll talk about, much later on, we'll talk about Olympic basketball, but Zach Levine even improved defensively this year. And I think they're looking at this, and they don't want to tarnish when you think about the Bulls reputation, they don't want to go back to, let's say, pre MJ Bulls type thing where it's like, oh, we had this run and now we're just kind of, you know, back in mediocrity or below mediocrity, picking very early in the lottery, let's say. And they're like, I think we should capitalize on the fact that Zach Levine is solid, and let's actually, do something. Let's make this, even if we're not going to win anything. If they believe that these moves are what's going to get them over like the Nets and the Bucks for the next few years, like I'm sorry, there's something else coming. But I think this is just to get them back into relevance again, to make Zach Levine, let's say, want to stay with this team with these moves. And as far as the moves itself, when I'm thinking about this team, right? I mean, the starting five looks like it could be straight up, an NBA 2K starting lineup, and you'd be like, oh my
Yeah.
God, like this is gonna win, like just from pure over, let's say, NBA 2K overall numbers, right? So, you have a great, maybe great, but very good, solid point guard in Lonzo. He's, a great passer. He's definitely excel as a shooter. He knows his role. He doesn't try and take over the game, but he knows the pockets of where to operate, and he can be like that second guy, that Robin to whatever star needs to get the ball distributed to him. And I think that I love point guards like that, right? It's solid. And he's great. He's solid on defense as well, and it's all around package. And I think he's getting up there to where he's not getting as underrated as you're saying, but I mean, for sure, I think he deserves a little more respect. So you have Lonzo there as like a distributor, and then you have Zach Levine as like a high, solid shooter. DeMar DeRozan, solid mid-range shooter. Patrick Williams, 3-and-D guy. And then you have Vucevic, who's he's a solid center. So you have all that together. It looks like a well-rounded team. But when I'm trying to think about this in like practice, it's going to be interesting just because, like you were talking about how Levine he's gotten better from three. He can be a perimeter guy,
Right.
but I think I'm just not personally. I just guess I am not a fan of DeRozan. Just like the way he plays, I feel like it's just not conducive to setting up the rest of the team for successful shot attempts. You know what I'm saying? It's not necessarily, if I guess this is me just buying into this, whatever analytics people are saying. It's like you go to the rim or you shoot a three, because I feel like if you're just stuck in the mid range, right? I mean, Levine also likes to drive and score and all of that, right? He also, I mean,
Yes.
Vucevic can spread out for sure, but I mean, he's a center. I mean, there's only so much, spacing he's going to be doing. He's not going to become Brooke Lopez. I mean, he's too valuable for that, in my opinion. No offense to Brooke Lopez, but I mean, Patrick Williams can do some spacing. It's just going to be interesting how this all lines up. I mean, I mean, as a Celtics fan, we've been thinking about Lonzo coming to the Celtics and what that would mean, bridging the way for two wings and being the guy that can maybe uh, be the distributor between, let's say, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, right? Two kind of ISO heavy guys. You have now you have Lonzo Ball as the guy that can just distribute all around. And we'll get to see that here with the Bulls because I think it feels kind of like it would be relatively ISO heavy, especially with DeRozan and Levine together. But I think maybe with Lonzo, it could work. Maybe Lonzo just creates enough ball movement there. And with Patrick Williams providing enough spacing, developing as a 3-point shooter, we'll see. I realized as I was doing this breakdown, coming in, I was a little skeptical, but after I'm talking myself through it, it could possibly work, especially if Levine is able to take more and more threes, and maybe not drive as much. It could possibly work and give DeRozan the space he needs. Maybe it could be, reverse in that way. So, yeah.
I think the Bulls is one of those teams, and other kind of like pundits who talk about this. They have one of the widest ranges of outcomes that possible.
Yeah.
Like you could see, they could either be a really, really good team, like something you could say maybe a top 4, maybe crack into the top 3 in the East, or they could just tumble out of the playoff entirely, depending on like how this team meshes and how well it does. I know that DeRozan isn't the most analytically friendly guy, and his style isn't that nice for the modern NBA, but I think overall there is he still gets the points, and I think the Bulls, and he's not a bad defender either, I think, in some ways, and so
he's not terrible, but he could improve.
He could improve, yes.
Oh, for sure. I mean, we're both Ringer fans. It feels like at this point we kind of just take Ringer's takes and kind of purpose them in a way and add some nuances. Like Kevin O'Connor was talking about this, about how DeRozan is not like, it's not the DeRozan that maybe I'm used to. I didn't get to watch a lot of Spurs this year. I just know with the Toronto, it was just, I don't know. He kept scoring points, but it just felt kind of weird to me. The way he was doing it was just, I don't know. It wasn't my cup of tea. And I mean, he was getting the job done as far as scoring is concerned. Who am I to, if he gets the job done, he gets the job done. Just, I felt a little uneasy with it. And I know Kevin O'Connor said he's gotten better with passing. He had I think career high assist numbers. And if he's less ISO, if he's less mid-range ISO heavy, and he can actually, again, just increase ball movement all around. Like ball movement is always, in my opinion, just a way to improve teams. Just period. It's always better to be a ball movement team and an ISO team. So if he's able to distribute more, and the cuts and all that can be going wild, with how spacing how much. I mean, maybe not DeRozan, but the other 4 guys, how much they can maybe space out if they want to. It could work. Yeah, it could definitely work on paper. We'll see if it actually works in reality. I feel like, this is, I mean, when you think about good teams, right? Well, maybe the Nets, it's a little different, but I'm trying, let me rephrase this. So we see a lot of these teams built in free agency, right? With, when they get a superstar in free agency, or with the Nets, they got a trio of superstars. I mean, the Clippers, although Kawhi came in free agency, but it was Kawhi and Paul George. All of these new teams, when you think about free agency, is really making a lot of these teams tick as well. So that's one group, and then the other group is just drafting well, right? And then you get to the Bulls, and I feel like the Bulls, the free agents that they're signing, it feels it's not at the level of a Kawhi or a LeBron or a KD, but they're doing so much that it's kind of an interesting take on it. We can try and amass this big 3 or big 4 that we can, but it's just it's not, there's not one player that is extreme, like a superstar, that they're developing out of this. So this is interesting in the sense that it's not necessarily organic how this is going about, but even with teams that aren't doing it organically, it ends up being a superstar, top 5 overall player, like in the NBA, like a LeBron or a KD
Yeah,
or Kawhi, like I'm saying. So this is an interesting, like, it's interesting in the sense that they're building inorganically by a bunch of free agents, but it's a bunch of like star free agents and not all-star free agents. Like I mean, Levine, I guess Levine is an all-star, right? But other, and Vucevic is, I guess, an all-star, but they're not, first team all NBA or second team all NBA. They're like, they're not necessarily there yet. They're not cracking that ceiling. So this is an interesting way that they're building this all through free agency.
yeah. I mean, yeah, I agree with that. I
It's,
think the
it's,
Bulls.
it's gonna be an interesting experiment to see how this goes. I mean, for sure.
Yeah, it's gonna be an experiment for sure.
And so I think that's all I got to talk about with the Bulls. I will
Yeah,
say with Caruso and I mean Kobe. Well, I like Kobe White, but with Kobe White and Caruso, I think that adds some depth as well to like the
yeah,
Caruso's an improvement on Satoransky. So I mean, I think they got some good depth too. It feels like I know Markkinen's kind of up in the air of what's going to happen to him. Thaddeus Young was involved in that side and trade for DeRozan, but uh, yeah, I think it's the Bulls I'm interested in only because it felt the price, like you were saying, interesting, right? I knew I forgot something. Uh, it felt steep on what they paid DeRozan. Like it just three
very,
million. It
very.
seems very steep, like bordering on 30 million a year. Uh,
His market wasn't that extensive, and the
his
Bulls
market
paid
wasn't going to be that
so
big,
much. Yeah,
and I mean, because I have personal opinions um, on DeRozan, I'm not necessarily a big fan of that. I'm a big fan of Lonzo. Whoever team is going to get Lonzo, I was a big fan of just because I like Lonzo that much.
yeah,
But especially with if you don't have to give up a first round pick, we'll talk about the Pelicans later. I have them in one of the what the hell are they doing teams, but so I mean that seems like a very steep price, and this
right.
ties into my thing of this feels like this is being built on 2K rather than kind of what we're accustomed to with the NBA. So it's going to be interesting this mismatch of bringing in borderline all stars on this team. We'll see if just a collection of borderline all stars to good supporting role players through free agency is going to build a team that can really contend, and that like whatever it looks like on paper can transcend that.
Absolutely.